Imagine being humiliated, stripped of dignity, and bound like a criminal, only for your abuser to discover you're the most powerful person they could have ever disrespected. This is the story of the night one arrogant cop tied a decorated general to a tree and set off a chain of events that would shake an entire city. Stay with me until the end, because the moment her soldiers arrive will leave you speechless. And if you believe justice should always win, make sure to subscribe, because these stories matter. Officer Daniel Harris was bored. 6 hours into his shift, the small town of Millbrook had given him nothing but quiet roads and silent radios. To him, boredom was worse than danger. It left him restless, itching for confrontation. He had a reputation. Fellow officers whispered about his temper, about the complaints lodged against him, about the way he used the badge not to protect but to dominate. But Harris didn't care. As far as he was concerned, his word was law. When the radar chirped at a black SUV barreling down the road, his lips curled into a smirk. Gotcha. The cruiser's sirens lit up the night. Red and blue flashed across wet pavement as Harris pulled onto the road, chasing down the SUV with a hunger in his eyes. General Olivia Grant sat behind the wheel, exhaustion etched into her face. She had just finished a 14-hour day at Fort Dawson. Meetings, briefings, troop reviews. Her responsibilities never ended. Her hands, calloused from decades of service, gripped the wheel loosely. Despite the fatigue, her posture was straight, her bearing proud. She was a woman who had led men into combat zones, who had made life-or-death decisions in war. But tonight, she just wanted to get home. A hot shower, a moment of peace, maybe a phone call to her teenage son before he fell asleep. When the flashing lights filled her rear-view mirror, her brow furrowed. She glanced at the clock. 10:47 p.m. What could this be about? The SUV slowed, pulling onto the shoulder. Rain pounded harder, drumming on the roof. Harris swaggered to the driver's side window, flashlight beam cutting through the glass. His voice dripped with hostility before Olivia could even speak. License and registration. Step out of the vehicle. Harris said to Olivia. Olivia, who was confused, replied, "Officer, is there a problem? I'm on my way home from base. These are government plates." Harris snapped immediately. "Did I ask for your life story? Out! Now!" Olivia blinked at the sharpness. She'd dealt with aggressive men before, but something in his tone made her pause. Calmly, she unbuckled and stepped out into the storm. Rain plastered her uniform to her skin. Harris circled her like a predator, shining the light into her face. Harris then asked her where SH was coming from. Olivia replied, "Fort Dawson. I'm a general. If you give me a moment, I'll show you my..." Before she could finish, Harris grabbed her arm, twisting behind her back and slamming her against the SUV. Olivia winced, her cheek pressed against cold metal. Olivia mustered in pain. "You're making a mistake." Harris mocked her. "Oh, I'm sure I am. Everyone I arrest says that." He cuffed her wrists tightly, ignoring her credentials when she tried to speak. His flashlight clattered to the ground as he shoved her toward a tree just off the road. With rough hands, Harris tied her cuffed wrist to the tree trunk. Rain streamed down her face as mud splashed up her boots. Harris leaned close, his voice low and cruel. "You think you're somebody important? Out here, you're nothing but another suspect. And tonight, you'll remember who runs this town." Olivia locked eyes with him, unflinching despite the pain. She said nothing, because she knew words would not reach a man drunk on power. For General Olivia Grant, this was not the battlefield she trained for. She had faced mortar fire, led missions under the cover of night, and stared down insurgents who wanted her dead. Yet here she was, humiliated by the very man who wore the same badge of service she had dedicated her life to protecting. Olivia made up her mind then. She would not beg. She would not break. Harris returned his cruiser, radioing in with a false report. "Yeah, I got a hostile suspect refusing to comply. Might be impersonating military. Possible stolen vehicle. Send backup." He leaned back, smirking, watching her shiver against a tree. In his mind, he had already won. This was power. This was control. But what Harris didn't know was that his arrogance had just lit a fuse he could never extinguish. Back at Fort Dawson, a young lieutenant frowned at his watch. General Grant was never late. She had promised to brief the night watch before heading home. But nearly an hour had passed. He pulled up the GPS tracker assigned to her government-issued SUV. His stomach dropped. The vehicle had moved for 40 minutes, stranded on a remote stretch outside Millbrook. He rushed to the duty officer. Within minutes, radios buzzed, orders were given, and soldiers began preparing vehicles. Concern spread like wildfire through the ranks. When a general goes missing, the army does not stay silent. And when one of their own is in danger, the response is swift, united, and unstoppable. Back on the roadside, Olivia closed her eyes, rain soaking her to the bone. But behind her stillness, her mind raced. She thought of her son. She thought of her soldiers waiting for her at the base. She thought of the generations of women and men who had stood tall under worse oppression. And she knew this humiliation would not stand. Thunder cracked overhead. Harris lit a cigarette, oblivious to the storm rolling not just across the sky but toward him, because in the distance, engines roared to life. Headlights lined up, convoys prepared to move. What Officer Harris thought was a harmless game of humiliation was about to ignite a storm of military fury he could never have imagined. The rain hadn't slowed. Water dripped from Olivia's hair, her fatigue jacket clinging to her like a second skin. Her wrists ached from the tight cuffs cutting into her skin. Yet her breathing was calm, steady. Years of military discipline kept her from showing fear. Her eyes locked on Harris as he leaned against his cruiser, smoking under the shelter of his open door. He occasionally glanced at her, smirking like a predator admiring captured prey. She thought about speaking, about demanding release. But she knew this kind of man. Words were fuel to his ego. Silence, dignity, and patience were her only weapons now. Harris flicked ash into the mud, muttering to himself. Another fake soldier. Thinks she's above the law. Well, let's see how important she feels tied up like this. The truth was, Harris didn't stop Olivia because of her speed. He stopped her because he saw a black woman in a government SUV. In his mind, that combination screamed challenge authority. And Harris thrived on those confrontations. But power intoxicates. And for Harris, humiliation wasn't just about control. It was about feeding an ego starved for dominance. What he didn't realize was that every minute Olivia remained bound to that tree, her army drew closer. Headlights appeared in the distance. A pickup truck slowed as it passed, its driver squinting at the scene. He saw Olivia cuffed to the tree, soaked in rain, and Harris standing casually nearby. The truck stopped. A man stepped out, confused. "Hey, officer, is everything all right?" Harris snapped back defensively. "Keep driving. This is police business." The man hesitated, looking at Olivia. She met his eyes silently, her stare sharp and commanding. For a second, he felt as though she was the authority, not the cop. But Harris barked again. "I said move along." Reluctantly, the man got back in his truck. He drove off, but unease gnawed at him. He reached for his phone as he pulled away. Meanwhile, at Fort Dawson, the motor pool buzzed with activity. Convoys were being fueled. Soldiers briefed. The lieutenant who discovered Olivia's stalled SUV relayed updates over radio. Her vehicle stationary. Officer presence reported at the location. We have no direct communication with her. A colonel stepped in. No one restrains a general without accountability. We roll in 10 minutes. Engines rumbled. Soldiers strapped on gear. In the command tent, Olivia's second-in-command clenched his fists. If they've touched her, he whispered under his breath. In the military, chain of command is sacred. And when the top of that chain is threatened, loyalty is absolute. What Harris had set in motion was not just anger. It was an unstoppable wave of discipline, fury, and justice marching his way. Harris's radio crackled. Dispatch. Backup en route. Officer Harris. ETA 15. He smirked and thought, good. Let's see if she's still talking big when she's surrounded by more of us. Olivia finally spoke. Her voice calm but edged with steel. You should release me. Now. Harris laughed and said, or what? You'll report me? Lady, you're not scaring anyone. Out here, I'm the law. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Out here, you've already signed your own report. You just don't know it yet. For the first time, Harris felt a flicker of unease. He quickly smothered it with bravado. On one side of the storm stood arrogance. A man convinced his badge shielded him from consequence. On the other side stood resilience. A general who had survived battlefields far harsher than this moment of humiliation. And between them, thunder rolled. Because two forces were on a collision course. One of unchecked ego, the other of unstoppable loyalty. Two more cruisers pulled up, lights painting the rain red and blue. Officers stepped out, approaching Harris. Who's this? One asked, motioning toward Olivia. Harris replied, smoothly, claimed she's military. Gave me attitude. Resisted. I secured her for safety. The others looked at Olivia, muddy-tied, rain-soaked, yet standing tall despite it all. Something about her posture didn't fit the story. One officer frowned. She looks official. Did you check her ID? Harris's jaw tightened. She's lying. Probably stolen vehicle. The other officer hesitated. Still, maybe we should verify before... Harris cut him off sharply. Are you questioning me? She's nothing. Let's process her back at the station. The backup officers exchanged uneasy glances, but Harris's authority in the moment kept them from pushing further. Despite the cuffs and rain, Olivia raised her voice, calm, deliberate. You're all making a critical mistake. My name is General Olivia Grant. ID 48,729. United States Army. You have two options. Release me now or face the consequences when my command arrives. The words hung heavy in the air. The backup officers froze. The title general meant something, even to them. But Harris scoffed. Ignore her. Delusional. Still, seeds of doubt had been planted. Engines roared as convoys left Fort Dawson. Humvees rolled in formation, headlights slicing through rain. Soldiers inside gripped rifles, faces grim. One sergeant muttered. If they've laid a hand on her, another replied, then Millbrook is about to learn the meaning of respect. What Harris didn't realize was that his arrogance had been broadcast across radios, whispered through ranks, and now burned like fire through a chain of command that did not forgive dishonor. The army was moving, and with each mile they closed in, the rope binding Olivia to that tree burned hotter against Harris's fate. Back in Millbrook, the man in the pickup truck had reached the diner, wet and shaken. He told others what he'd seen. Cops got some woman tied to a tree out by the highway. Looked like military. Didn't feel right. Whispers spread fast. Phones buzzed. Some locals had seen General Grant at parades, ceremonies. Could it be her? Unease began to ripple through the small town. One of the backup officers pulled Harris aside. Look, man, she doesn't act like a fake. If she really is who she says she is, we're screwed. Harris's voice hardened. She's nothing, and you'll back me up or you'll regret it. The officer hesitated, glancing at Olivia. Her steady gaze unsettled him. He felt as though she was silently recording every detail, every injustice. The rain eased slightly, leaving mist rising from the pavement. Olivia straightened her back against a tree, speaking not to Harris but to the other officers. Every action has consequences. You're witnessing misconduct in real time. You have a choice to stop it or to be part of it. Her words were not shouted. They were measured, disciplined, like orders given in combat, and the officers shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. Even bound, she commanded authority, because true power is not in the cuffs or the badge. It is in the truth carried by one's voice, and her truth was undeniable. Suddenly, in the distance, faint rumbling grew louder. At first, Harris assumed it was thunder, but the sound was steady, mechanical, powerful. The backup officers exchanged looks. One muttered, "What is that?" Headlights appeared far down the road. Multiple sets, aligned, approaching fast. Olivia closed her eyes for a brief moment, relief softening her expression. Then she opened them, fixing her gaze on Harris. "Your time is up." What Harris believed was thunder was the march of justice. And once it arrived, there would be no escape. The distant rumbling of engines grew louder, more distinct, until it was undeniable. Harris, standing near his cruiser, frowned, his ears straining against the sound of thunder that wasn't. Harris asked, feeling uneasy, "What the hell is that noise?" He scanned the road, barely able to see beyond the torrential rain. The other officers, their attention now drawn to the approaching sound, exchanged uneasy glances. One of the officers, who was beginning to understand what's happening, replied, "That's not thunder." The sound of heavy trucks, military-grade vehicles, reverberated through the air. Harris's heartbeat quickened as he turned back toward Olivia. She stood there, calm, collected, as though she had been waiting for this moment. Olivia said, her voice sounding very steady, "You're out of time." Olivia's words hit Harris like a blow. He glanced at her, her demeanor unwavering despite her cuffs, her eyes flashing with the certainty of a woman who had seen the worst of humanity and had still come out on top. But Harris, ever the arrogant officer, wasn't ready to concede. Not yet. He forced himself to smile, trying to mask his growing panic. Harris then replied Olivia through gritted teeth, "You really think your little army is going to stop me?" He turned to his officers. "Stand your ground. Don't let her get in your heads." But deep down, Harris felt a twinge of doubt. The rumbling of the approaching vehicles wasn't just a sound, it was a statement. Something powerful, something unstoppable. The first glimpse of headlights broke through the haze of rain. At first there was just one, then two, and then dozens. Olivia's soldiers arrived in full force. The heavy trucks roared down the road, their tires slicing through puddles, sending spray into the air. At the head of the convoy, a Humvee led the charge, military decals barely visible beneath the layers of rain and grime. Inside, soldiers sat at attention, weapons secured, but the grim determination on their faces was clear. They knew exactly what was happening, and they knew exactly who was responsible. A lieutenant from the convoy commanded over radio. "This is the military police convoy. We are en route to secure General Grant. All units, prepare for full intervention." Harris could feel the weight of the approaching vehicles. The ground vibrated beneath his feet, and for a brief, horrifying moment, he realized just how out of his depth he was. But pride, that fierce, uncontrollable force, held him in place. Harris now yelling to his backup, "Don't you let them intimidate you. We hold the line." But his voice wavered. The convoy had now reached the outskirts of Millbrook. The headlights from the trucks painted the landscape in cold, white light. Olivia remained still, her hands still bound to the tree. The soldiers, however, began to disperse, flanking the scene like a well-oiled machine, surrounding the area with military presence that Harris could no longer ignore. In the lead Humvee, the commanding officer watched Harris through binoculars. The commanding officer then asked the lieutenant coldly, "Is that Officer Harris?" Lieutenant replied, "Yes, sir. That's the one." The convoy had arrived. The military police had disembarked, their boots slapping against the wet ground, their eyes focused on the scene before them. They were ready for action. But Olivia, despite her restraints, remained calm, the essence of controlled power. She spoke one final time to Harris before the storm hit. Olivia then said slowly, "Your actions today will have consequences. You are not above the law. I gave my life for this country, for people like you, and now I will make sure you face the truth of your actions." She turned to the soldiers surrounding her, her voice becoming louder now. "Uncuff me." The officer nearest her hesitated. He looked at his superior, unsure. The commanding officer nodded. One of the military police officers moved forward, and with a swift motion, he unlocked the cuffs. Olivia's arms fell freely to her sides. She flexed them briefly, as though shaking off the restraints. Harris stood frozen, unable to speak, watching Olivia's slow, deliberate movements. She was no longer just a woman he had tied to a tree. She was General Olivia Grant, and she was taking control of the situation step by step. The backup officers, who had previously stood by him, now watched in silence. They exchanged looks, none of them sure what to do. The atmosphere shifted from one of conflict to one of defeat. Harrison said shakingly, "You can't do this. You can't just take me down." Olivia's gaze bore into him. Olivia replied him calmly, "You've already done it yourself, officer. It's just a matter of time now." As the soldiers advanced, Harris stepped back, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The arrogance that propelled him forward now felt like a weakness. The military might was overwhelming, and he was utterly powerless. The soldiers spread out, forming a perimeter around Harris and his officers. The storm of rain and tension seemed to wash over the small town of Millbrook, replacing the anger with an undeniable sense of order. The military was here, and they were in control. The commanding officer then asked Olivia, "General Grant, we secured the area. Harris and his officers will be taken into custody. We'll handle the investigation from here." Olivia nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over her. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoring the balance of justice. But as the soldier began to move in on Harris, he did the unthinkable. He pulled his gun from his holster, his hand trembling. In the pouring rain, the officers surrounding Harris stiffened. They had no choice but to react. Olivia stepped forward, her voice hardened. "Put the weapon down. Harris, you won't win this. Not now." Harris's hand shook as he aimed the gun toward the ground. Harris then said desperately, "You think you can just take me down? You think you can just walk away from this?" But just as the words left his lips, the commanding officer stepped forward. The moment stretched on, and then, before anyone could react, a loud shot rang out. A figure appeared from the shadows, a new, unexpected player in this game of power. It wasn't one of Olivia's men, but a civilian, a local who had been watching from the sidelines and had seen enough. The camera cuts to black, leaving the sound of the shot echoing in the rain. The sound of the shot was deafening in the storm. Time seemed to slow, the rain falling like a curtain over the scene. Harris stood frozen, the gun still gripped tightly in his trembling hands. For a moment, no one moved. Not Olivia, not the soldiers. The air was thick with tension. the smell of rain and gunpowder mixing together. The distant sound of the Humvee's engines had now faded, replaced by the deafening silence that followed the shot, commanding officer yelling, alarmed, "Get down! Get down! Everyone cover!" Olivia dropped to ground, her instincts kicking in, even as the soldiers scrambled for cover. The gunshot had echoed in the distance, but no one knew where it had come from. Then, emerging from the midst of the rain-soaked battlefield, a figure stepped into view. A civilian, drenched but calm, stood at the edge of perimeter. His face was shadowed, but his intent was clear. He had taken the shot. But why? The soldiers stood their ground, aiming their rifles at the newcomer, ready for whatever move he made next. As Olivia rose to her feet, she made eye contact with the mysterious figure. There was something about him, a familiarity, a knowingness. She hadn't seen him before, but something in his demeanor told her he wasn't a threat. Olivia then commanded her soldiers, standing tall, "Hold your fire. Stand down." The soldiers hesitated, their rifles still raised but no longer aimed. Olivia, her eyes never leaving the figure, made her way toward him. The tension in the air was palpable as the rain beat down harder. She asked, "Who are you? Why did you fire that shot?" The figure finally stepped closer, revealing a grim expression. He was older than she expected, his weathered face hardened by years of struggle. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who had seen much and understood even more. The man replied quietly, "I had to stop him. I had to stop Harris before it went too far." Olivia's heart raced as she processed his words. Could this man be connected to Harris somehow? What did he know? She then asked him manly, "What do you mean? Who are you?" The stranger replied, "I'm the one Harris ignored. The one he wronged long ago. The one he thought he could bury." Meanwhile, Harris stood still, his eyes wide in panic. The scene had shifted from one of control to chaos in a matter of moments. The mysterious figure had disrupted the balance, and now he was left to face the consequences of his actions. Harris became nervous and started shaking. "What is this? Who is this man? What does he know about me?" The backup officers, still around Harris, exchanged worried glances. The officer closest to him shook his head, clearly unsure of what was happening. One of the backup officers then spoke softly to Olivia. "Sir, we should get out of here. This is beyond us now." But Harris, desperate to save face, refused to back down. He took a step forward, raising his gun once more, though his hands were visibly trembling. Arrogant Harris, still refusing to back down, said shakingly, "I will not let this stand. No one gets to take me down." But before he could make another move, Olivia stepped forward, positioning herself between Harris and the mysterious figure. Her presence was commanding, the very embodiment of military authority. Olivia then said to Harris calmly, but very determined, "You're done, Harris. No more games." As Olivia stepped closer to Harris, the mysterious man took a step forward, drawing the attention of everyone present. The soldiers, now fully on alert, watched as he moved, the quiet resolve in his actions undeniable. The strange man that addressed the soldiers, saying, "You don't understand yet. Harris is more than just a rogue officer. He's part of a much larger web of corruption, a web that stretches deep into your own military ranks." The words hit like a thunderclap. The soldiers exchanged confused glances. Was this man claiming that Harris was involved in something much bigger? Could it be possible? Olivia became shocked. She had to ask with a hardened voice, "What do you mean? Are you suggesting that this isn't just about tonight? That Harris is connected to something else?" The man nodded gravely, his expression darkening. The man then replied, "This is only the beginning. Harris didn't just humiliate you because he felt powerful. He did it because he's hiding something. A secret that goes back years. He's worked with people who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. As the man spoke, Harris began to lose what little composure he had left. His breath became shallow, his eyes wild with fear. Harris, who tries to deny the allegation, replied desperately, "You're lying. You're all lying." He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, his hands still clutching the gun. The soldiers in the area began to close in, but Olivia held up her hand, signaling them to stop. Then she said to Officer Harris again, "Put the gun down, Harris. It's over." But Harris was beyond reason. His paranoia had taken over, and he began to panic, his body trembling uncontrollably. Before they realized what was happening, Harris started screaming, "No, I won't be taken down like this. No one takes me down." Without warning, Harris turned the gun toward himself. The scene played out in a slow-motion haze. His finger on the trigger, his face twisted with fear and anger, the sound of the rain pouring down, a final standoff between man and consequence. But before he could pull the trigger, the mysterious man lunged forward, knocking the gun from Harris's hand. The weapon skittered across the muddy ground, the echo of its impact cutting through the air. The soldiers, reacting in an instant, were on Harris in a heartbeat, disarming him and pinning him to the wet earth. Olivia stood silently, watching as a man who had been the catalyst for this moment stood tall, his face calm but resolved. Olivia then spoke with authority and gave him the order, "Take him into custody. He'll face trial for his actions." The mysterious man stepped back, his eyes never leaving Harris. He seemed to sense that his role in this was now over. As Harris was led away, his face flushed with both shame and rage, Olivia turned toward the man. She nodded, recognizing the weight of his actions. Olivia then said to him solemnly, "You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate it." The man gave her a small nod. "I did what needed to be done. Now you do the rest," the man said. Olivia gave him a long, searching look, but before she could speak again, he disappeared into the mist and the rain. No one saw where he went or how. He had come to do what was needed and had now faded away, leaving the justice of the moment to those who would follow through with it. Harris was taken into custody, and the storm, both literal and figurative, began to subside. Olivia stood in the rain for a moment longer, breathing in the air as the last of the military trucks rolled away. The town of Millbrook would never be the same, nor would the people who had witnessed the events unfold. But for Olivia, this moment was about more than just her. It was about a system that had been broken and needed to be fixed, no matter the cost. As Olivia walked back to her convoy, her thoughts turned to the future. Harris was just one part of a larger issue, a piece of a puzzle that stretched far beyond this town. She turned to her lieutenant, a man who had been by her side through it all. Olivia said softly, "We've only scratched the surface. This is bigger than we thought." The camera lingers on her face, determined, knowing that the road ahead will be long and fraught with challenges. Sometimes justice is a long road, a road that doesn't end with just one battle. But with every step, the truth becomes clearer, and the truth is about to change everything.